Imagine a book published way back in 1543 that didn't just ruffle a few feathers, it quite literally moved the Earth, and in doing so, redrew our entire map of the universe. But what if that very book, the one that kicked off a scientific revolution, was sent out into the world with a secret act of sabotage? An unauthorized preface that basically told everyone, hey, don't take this seriously, it's just a mathematical game. And what if that old story you've probably heard, that the book just landed with a thud and nobody read it, is completely wrong? What if it was actually the talk of the town among every important astronomer of the era? Well, that's exactly what we're getting into today. We're going to explore the incredible story behind Nicolaus Copernicus's 1543 masterpiece on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. All the historical sources we're using are, of course, linked for you in the description. We'll set the stage with the old view of the universe, then look at the book itself, unravel that tricky preface controversy, bust a huge myth about its readership, examine its slow clash with faith, and finally, look at its lasting legacy. All right, so to really get how big of a deal this book was, you have to understand the universe that everyone, and I mean everyone, believed in before Copernicus came along. For something like 1,400 years, Ptolemy's geocentric model was the law of the land. Earth was stationary, right at the center of everything. And look, it worked, kind of. Think of it like a beautiful but incredibly overcomplicated clock. To get the planets to move the way we see them, astronomers had to keep adding extra gears, these clumsy little fixes called epicycles. It was elegant, sure, but it was also a mess. So what Copernicus did was less of a tweak and more of a total teardown. Instead of adding another gear, he threw out the old blueprints and started over. He put the sun in the middle, and suddenly our home, the Earth, was just another planet in motion. And just like that, so much of that crazy complexity just melted away. It was a complete paradigm shift. So let's talk about the book itself. When it was published in 1543, it wasn't this huge, loud explosion. It was more like a quiet earthquake. You know, the kind where the initial tremors are barely felt, but the aftershocks end up reshaping the entire landscape. Yeah, and this thing was no pamphlet. De Revolutionibus is a dense, highly mathematical, 6-volume monster of a book. Copernicus wasn't just tossing out a cool idea. He was building a complete, mathematically rigorous system designed to replace Ptolemy's Almagest, which had been the gold standard for centuries. But get this, Copernicus sat on this revolutionary work for decades. He was worried people would just laugh at him. The person we have to thank is a young, brilliant mathematician named Georg Rithicus. He journeyed to meet the aging Copernicus, saw the manuscript, and was absolutely blown away. He basically refused to leave until Copernicus agreed to share it with the world.
So the book finally gets sent off to the printer. And this is where the story takes a really dramatic twist. It involves what many saw as a profound betrayal.
Right, so the theologian overseeing the printing, a man named Andreas Osiander, secretly added his own anonymous preface. And in it, he basically says, look, these ideas don't have to be true or even likely. As long as they help with calculations, that's all that matters. It was a Trojan horse, you know, a way to sneak this radical idea past the censors by pretending it wasn't a description of reality. And Copernicus's friends were absolutely livid. This little note here from Michael Maslin shows that Rheticus was, to put it lightly, furious. He felt Osiander had completely misrepresented Copernicus's entire life's work, which was to describe the true cosmos, not just a mathematical fiction. And for years, nobody knew. Most people just assumed Copernicus had written that cautious intro himself. It wasn't until the next great astronomer, Johannes Kepler, did some real detective work, poring over different copies, that he proved Osiander was the one who wrote it. Okay, so all this drama leads us to one of the biggest and most stubborn myths in the history of science. The idea that after all that, De Revolutionibus was just ignored. Exactly. That phrase, the book that nobody read, comes from a really popular book from 1959. And it's a great line. It paints this romantic picture of a lone genius, totally misunderstood. The only problem is, it's just not true. Well, this one number just blows that whole idea out of the water. 601. For 35 years, the historian Owen Gingerich went on this epic quest to find every single surviving copy from the first 2 editions. He found and personally examined 601 of them. You just don't find that many copies of a book that nobody read. And here's the real kicker from Gingerich's work. It wasn't a bestseller, for sure. This wasn't something you'd pick up for a beach read. But the people who mattered, the top astronomers and mathematicians all across Europe, they owned it, they studied it, and they scribbled all over it. It was the essential text for the next wave of scientific giants. So if all the top scientists were reading it, what was the reaction from the church? Well, the story here isn't an instant explosion. It's much more like a very, very slow-burning fuse. Interestingly, the first loud objections actually came from Protestant reformers, and this was before the book was even published. You can see here from this quote that Martin Luther heard about the idea and immediately dismissed it based on a literal reading of the Bible. If Joshua told the sun to stand still, then the sun must be the thing that moves. The Catholic Church's official response, on the other hand, was way slower. For 73 years, Think about that. More than a lifetime, the book circulated without any official problem. It was only in 1616, mostly because of Galileo pushing the theory so hard, that the church finally put it on the Index of Forbidden Books. And even then, it was just suspended until corrected. It took over 200 years for it to be fully cleared. So, after all that, what's the real legacy of this book? How did this quiet earthquake eventually manage to move the entire world? Okay, so let's tie it all together. Copernicus gave us a beautifully simple, sun-centered system. It got published with that sneaky preface trying to downplay its own importance. It was absolutely not the book nobody read, it was a book read by everyone who mattered in science. The conflict with religion was a slow burn, not a big bang. And most importantly, this was the bedrock that Kepler, Galileo, and Newton used to build modern physics. And really, this whole story is about intellectual courage. So the next time you see a simple model of our solar system on a screen or in a textbook, something we just take for granted, take a second to think about the guts it took to be the very first person to draw that map, challenging centuries of accepted truth. If there's one thing to take away from the journey of this idea, it's this: first a tool, then a truth. It entered the world disguised as just a useful trick for calculation, was put to the test by the experts, and eventually, its reality became undeniable. Disclaimer and bibliography in the description.